This is Retirement Roadmap Radio with Mark Fricks of Master Plan Retirement Consultants. Listen in as we address your retirement concerns and provide insight to help put you on the path to achieving your retirement goals. And now, Retirement Roadmap Radio.
Hey folks, welcome back to Retirement Roadmap with Master Plan Retirement Consultants. I'm Evan, and with me as always, financial advisor and retirement planner Mark Fricks. It's easy to remember how tight our money was in 2022. From the grocery store to the gas pump, inflation pressures had many of us revisiting our monthly budgets to trim the fat. Things have loosened up a bit here in 2023, but we are still seeing and feeling the effects of inflation. Today, we'll be discussing inflation's effects on your retirement and how we can design a retirement plan to help withstand the effects of inflation over a full retirement. Inflation, as a simple definition, is the declining of purchasing power, or in the U.S., the decline of the value of the dollar. Mark, to begin, what are some of the ways inflation affects retirement, and how dangerous can it be to a full retirement plan?
Yeah, so one of the first things I see a lot of times when people come to see us is they've got these numbers in their head, but it doesn't include inflation. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, we can live on blank, and we're retiring in 5 years, so our Social Security is this, we're good, and then we start running numbers. And then they start going, oh, well, didn't think about inflation, and sometimes it doesn't feel real. I think it feels real, for the people that buy groceries, whether that be the husband or the wife or whoever, or the brother or the sister. It certainly feels real when you buy gas, but gas is so volatile. One day it could be up 20 cents, the next day you feel good because it's down 20 cents. But it definitely affects the retirement planning, which is why it is a crucial component of the reports we run, the calculations we do, the thought pattern, the education of the client, everything. Inflation is a major concern, and there are things you can do, but it's got to be part of the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You just reminded me, actually, we've commented before that when we have someone come in to meet us and to discuss as an initial consultation, preliminary discussion, we've very rarely have someone come in with an actual written plan or an income plan. Mm-hmm. There was one time around the time I had started, about a year in, maybe 2019, a couple came in and they had an actual written out income plan. And that was, I think you may have bought them dinner or something because you'd never seen that before.
Something like that.
But the one thing that they did not include was inflation. And then when we come back with the reports, you start to see that chipping and eating away. A little bit more on the definition side. Can you explain the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, and why that is not always the full picture?
Right. Yeah. So, it's impossible to measure inflation on everything in the marketplace. I understand that. So what they actually do is they actually take a group of products. So let's say they take apples. How many kinds of apples are there? Hundreds and hundreds. Well, they don't count hundreds of apples. They take a general category of apples. And so an apple in Washington State, maybe they had a bad growing season, and so they're much more expensive, whereas the growing season maybe in Georgia was good, and they didn't go up as much, but they kind of took an average. So you get that problem. But you've also got the big problem is the basic one we use, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, leaves out the components of food and energy. Now, we're talking to a lot of people here, between YouTube and radio and podcast and all this stuff. And so just a show of hands, if you're not driving, who eats? Anybody? Yeah, I see at least a couple of hands go up. Who drives? Who uses energy? Who uses oil in their home or propane or natural? Of course, we all do. So people say, well, why doesn't the government include that in inflation numbers? Well, the government's initial response is they're too volatile, okay? But the real response, if you dig down, is that the government says they're not measuring actual inflation. They're measuring the impact of inflation on the consumer. So think about this. We've experienced this over the last year or two. I'm looking at cheaper eggs. I'm looking at cheaper gasoline. I'm maybe carpooling. I'm driving less. So the impact of higher gas prices has not been the full 22% increase we saw. It's been maybe 5 or 10 on me or the average consumer. The same thing with food. Are people eating out less? Yes. Statistics show us people are eating out less. Are they buying more? You know, some of the best stock right now is things like Dollar General. People are buying food and other things at Dollar General instead of Walmart or Kroger or Publix, because they know right now, I don't care what the brand is, I just need the cheapest coffee I can get because it's gone up 60% of whatever it may be. So it's the impact of inflation. Now, is that fair? I don't know that it is. I think it gives a credence of mistrust to the government, because if I'm buying groceries and I spend $100 and I used to get 3 bags and I'm getting 1.5, and I look at the government and say, you say groceries have gone up 8%? No, they've gone up 40 or 50%.
Right.
So you can't read the numbers and say, oh, it's got to be more about the effect on me.
Right.
And how's that affected me? And so now I'm back to using coupons and apps. You can pull up things for if you're in a certain store or whatever. And so that's the average American is doing that. And so when you look at inflation, the government, their goal is 2%. Okay. And I think the average, if you look at the last 80 to 100 years, is about 3. So it's not been too bad. But the real inflation average is probably more like 4 to 5. So as you know, a lot of times we'll use 4% as kind of a baseline for our inflation numbers and income and things like that. So,
right.
Yeah, and so the other problem too, Evan, that leads to is that Social Security increases are not based on your pocketbook. They're based on the Consumer Price Index, which
right.
does not include food and groceries. So you may get a bump of, I think it was 7 or 8, 9% in 2022, but real inflation, if you really look at the numbers, is more like 12 to 15%.
Right.
So it does not keep up. Does it help? Yes. Is it better than not having it? Yes. Does it keep up? No. And so over time, and if you're retired for 30 years, your dollar is shrinking more and more based on your income. And so that means more and more money has to come from where? Your pocket, your retirement account, your part-time job at Walmart, whatever it may be. And so we have to plan for what people have heard us talk about a lot, which is the retirement income gap.
Right.
It's going to be increasing as you go. So a couple of neat little stats I brought up here. I thought this might be a great place to pull this in here. Over the last 100 years, inflation has averaged between 0 and 23%. Can you imagine 23%? During the gold standard, nations averaged almost 0 inflation. And I didn't dig into why, but I thought it was very interesting. During the 19th century until 1914, the nations that were on the gold standard had very little inflation. The dollar has lost 21% of its purchasing power over the last 10 years. 21%. So it's 80 cents versus $1 now. Pretty significant. And just kind of an interesting one, in 1930, which I know is a long time ago, okay, but the average house was less than 4,000. Today, it's almost 300,000. Okay, so it's real. It's funny, Evan, I've told you this story. I know you've heard this story told to clients before too, but I had a colleague that was telling me about one of their clients that came in, and they were talking about inflation, and the guy said, nope, no such thing as inflation. He said, well, what do you mean there's no such thing as inflation? He said, he pulled out $1. He said, see this dollar? What was it worth 10 years ago? And my colleague said, $1. He said, what's it worth now? He said, technically $1. No inflation. It's still worth $1. Okay. So hopefully we have an audience. In fact, I know we have an audience much brighter than that. But yeah, inflation is the fact that dollar is now worth 70 cents or 60 cents or 50 cents. And you need a lot more of it. And then you take a look at the flip side of employee wages going up. They have not kept up with inflation over the last few years. And so now, again, less money in your pocket causes you to either get a second job or buckle down or put off those projects or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so you covered really perfectly my second point about income streams in retirement. So as we all know, one of the biggest focuses is replacing your paycheck,
right?
So that you can retire. So that first nearly universal income stream for all Americans is Social Security. And as we know, there is a cost of living adjustment or COLA adjustment to attempt to keep up with inflation. But as we also know, and as you mentioned, it tends to lag a point or two behind actual inflation. And average times, right?
Right.
What about pensions? If someone is lucky enough in this day and age in 2023 to have a pension, are those COLA adjusted, or is that kind of on a case-by-case basis?
Pretty much what we're seeing now over the last 5-6 years is anybody that comes in with a pension, if it's a private pension like a corporation, it does not have a cost of living adjustment to it, very rarely. Most of the government pensions still do, like the FERS, which is the federal government pension plan. It has a cost of living. Again, it doesn't keep up with inflation. It helps, okay? County governments in our area, state governments are still having some cost of living increases, fairly good ones. But again, I don't think it's sustainable. I'm already seeing some cracks in those armors as well, depending on what state you're in, what county you're in, or whatever. And even now, the federal government is debating changing the formula of how they figure that pension, not doing away with the cost of living necessarily, but of changing the formula of how they figure the pension and cost of living increases. So it's not going to get better. Right. It's going to get worse. And so it becomes even more dependent on the individual to have the ability to make up that gap. And of course, as you know, Evan, our job is to help maximize that gap filler, but it's still going to be more and more reliant on the consumer.
Okay, so in times of higher inflation in those seasons, the pragmatic retiree may very simply say, okay, time to look at my budget and let's tighten up the purse strings as it were in this season. Mm-hmm. But what about the person that says, I worked my entire life so that I wouldn't have to worry about money in retirement? What are some of our answers to creating a plan? And how do we build in inflation protection, if there even exists inflation protection, into a retirement plan? Yeah,
there is. Of course, we take into account what Social Security, what we feel like it's going to do over the coming years. But from an inflation standpoint, there's a couple of things. Long range, what we do is we overestimate what we think inflation will be, and then we take a look at what the client has in reserves, in 401ks or whatever, and making sure there's enough there to fill that gap. And if not, what are steps we can take now, not in 10 years, not in 20 years, but now, to go ahead and find ways to maximize our growth, maximize our income. We have been very blessed to be able to find a few companies over the last couple of years that provide some of these newer brand annuities that not only guarantee lifetime income, but guarantee increased lifetime income that actually can keep up and maybe even surpass inflation. So there's some really neat tools. We're always staying on top of that, of course, but just we plan ahead, and the further ahead we can plan, then the better opportunities and the better success we'll have.
I want to take a moment real quick, folks, to remind you guys to check out our website, masterplanretire.com. There you can find multiple retirement resources, retirement checklists, link to the podcast, to the YouTube channel, as well as a Schedule Now button that will give you an offering of a complimentary retirement consultation with Mark. That's an opportunity for you to ask any of your retirement questions, get some feedback on that, have some reports ran so you have a good vantage point for your own retirement. You can get there on masterplanretire.com or our phone number 770-980-9262. And of course, we offer face-to-face appointments in our home office in Marietta, Georgia, but we also offer Zoom. Perhaps you it's not as convenient to drive over from the state across or so, but also phone calls work as well. So check that out, masterplanretire.com.
And by the way, Evan, don't let, if you're 4 states away or whatever, we now have clients in 22 different states, and so we are very good at working across state lines. We could be licensed anywhere if we're not already licensed there, and I still do some traveling. I still teach face-to-face throughout the Southeast. We still see clients face-to-face throughout the Southeast as well. Maybe not as frequently as before COVID, because we've gotten so adept at teaching online and meeting online. But there's some folks, maybe even I've got one client, they're about 3 states away, and they're like, we've done several Zoom meetings, and they're like, maybe just one time we can meet face to face. I said, yeah, we'll work it out. We'll make it work, and it's worth that if we can develop that trust and that relationship to make sure that this long-term relationship works. So just a little byline there.
Yeah. And traditionally, to fight inflation, we put money in the stock market. We, the collective we, that's kind of the go-to. Well, the stock market is there to help grow your money and stay ahead of inflation. But Are there some more specifics to the retirement age individual when it comes to using the stock market to beat inflation?
Yeah, first of all, the reason that we keep money in the stock market is because it is the one place that beats inflation. People are looking at the market, and since our bear market, the S&P was down almost 20% in 2022. This year, it's up about half of that, 10 to 14, depending on which market you look at. But inflation's up 8 or 9. So some of that increase in the stock market makes us feel good. But the stocks are more expensive because the dollar's worth less, So let's not get too excited, all right? I mean, I'm glad. I love to show positive numbers, but let's also understand, but if we hadn't had any money in the market, if we were sitting in the bank, if we were sitting wherever, I've got clients saying, hey, I bought a 5% CD. That's great. Inflation's running at 8. So now you're only losing 3%, all right? But being some of our money in the market, to combat that inflationary seasons that we will have. And so that's why it's important to keep some money in the stock market. Other than that, again, there's some little things we can do. I've had several clients over the last 12 months have come to me and said, my car's on its last leg, or we want to build a garage, or whatever it may be. And I'm like, well, timing's important. And the timing of buying a truck now or last year or last 6 months, or a car or whatever, is not great because they're more expensive. They're getting top dollar. Some vehicles are actually getting a premium on top of the invoice because of the shortages, okay, and because of inflation. And so let's not buy right now. I mean, if you have to, that's one thing. But I told a client the other day, they said, I need to buy a car soon. I said, can you wait 6 months? Can you wait 9 months? Because I think we're going to be through most of this. I think that your stock market account will be up even more. I think the prices will pull back as they continue restocking from COVID and chip shortages and everything else.
We're starting to see that in the automobile industry now.
Absolutely. So the lots are looking full again. And so it's got to take a little bit more time, but let's give it some more time. And unless your car just falls apart in the driveway, maybe put a little bit more time off if you can.
And as far as those income streams too, and protecting those from inflation, that's really why one of the reasons the personal pension plan is so powerful. You have control of creating your own pension rather than an employer private pension. But that's one of the reasons we use those annuities, and they're historically have the best growth that they've ever had, and that is guaranteed money. Correct? Yeah.
So what's changed so much about annuities? I don't know if people realize this, but the first annuity in this country came from Europe in 1759. This is not a new concept, folks. Okay. But the problem with annuities has always been no death benefit. If there's money left and you're getting income and you pass away, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go to your kids or anybody else. Now we're adding death benefits, income riders that accelerate the growth of your income. So there's different products now. They've gotten much more competitive, much more regulated as well. And so I'm not going to say there's not any gotchas. There are better ones out there than there's also some bad ones. So you need the right one. You need a fiduciary to guide you in the right direction, but there are much better tools. So as you said, we've had people come to us and they've got an annuity at work, let's say. And let's say they can take a $500 a month or take a $100,000 lump sum. Well, many times after looking at the numbers, we'll take the lump sum because it's in their control. They don't have to turn it on now. They can try to get some growth out of it first. And if they pass away, it can go to kids and grandkids. Whereas the annuity at work, many times, except for a spouse, it can't go down the line. Not every time, but most of the time, there's very little beneficiary availability, and so you want more control. So we call those, as Evan said, a personal pension plan. It's your own pension plan. You own it, you control it, you do with it, you grow it as you want to grow it, all of that. So it's a very powerful tool that we use with a lot of our clients.
It seems like more than any time, at least in my lifetime, is a call for retirees to be more self-sufficient than they've ever been. Times of being able to rely on external sources, be it the government or pension plans or 401ks and stuff like that, are becoming more and more limited, and requires us to really be more strategic in how we plan out our retirement and where that money is going to come from. And the personal pension plan is a perfect opportunity or an illustration of that point. You create your pension. You are in control of what that money's doing and when it comes out, how it comes out. It's a huge part of what we do. And just a side note, and we've got other episodes about what we call the LERP, or the IUL policy, and that's kind of the same. You can enter that into a similar concept of self-sufficiency that goes down the whole pathway concept of becoming your own banker and all that. That's a whole another conversation. But that's becoming more and more important as the times continue to change.
Really, Evan, that's why holistic planning fiduciary firms like ours are becoming so important, so popular. We've got so many people referring so many people to us, so many folks attending classes because they are realizing that just like the health field a few years ago, people learned, I got to take some of my health into my own hands. I got to get to the doctor. I can't just Google something. They're also saying, I've got to get my finances in my own hands too. It's my responsibility. The government's got a little bit here and a little bit there, but then, I'm sorry, they can't take care of everybody. The money's not there. Right. There's not enough taxpayers to pay. Already, you see Social Security. The possibility of it being underfunded by 2032, 2033. So the money is not necessarily there. And Evan, we hear about taxing the rich. If you triple the tax on the top 5%, it still would not cut into the deficit more than about 15%. So that's not the key. The key is becoming more self-sufficient, getting the right kind of help, taking the bull by the horns, whatever else you want, whatever slogan or saying I can do, but just take responsibility for your own lives and creating that legacy for future generations as well.
How about precious metals for combating inflation?
Precious metals, again, are pretty much like any investment. They're not magical. You look at the long term, they earn like 6 to 9%. But what's great about them is when times get tough, they rise quickly. And when do times get tough? Well, when inflation's higher, because when inflation gets higher, what happens? The economy starts slowing down, the Fed starts putting the brakes on the economy, and we saw gold go up by a few $100s an ounce a couple of months ago. So precious metals plays a role in hedging against market losses which occur because of inflationary times. So again, it's another tool, and we could probably talk about 6 other tools, but those are some of the more important ones that just to kind of give you an appetite of, hey, there is something out there that can help me.
We only have about 2 minutes left, so before we jump into that, we do hear a lot of people asking us about Treasury, inflation-protected securities, the Treasury securities. TIPS, as they're known. Sure. Any comments on those? Well,
they're fine, but you can only buy, is it $10,000 a year?
I believe so,
TIPS, yeah, per person. So a husband and wife can buy 20. So you're not going to put your entire savings in there, but I think if, they were paying 8 or 9% last year. Had several clients put $10,000 and $20,000 into them. That's fine. Just understand they're not very liquid, and they are taxable. But if you could still get one and you got an extra $10,000, absolutely buy one, and then in 10, 20, 30 years it'll be worth a good bit more. All of that profit's taxable, okay? And again, you're very limited on how much you can buy, but nothing wrong with those at all.
Yeah. And this might be a bad question right now because it might open up a whole new conversation. But what about cash or income-producing assets like real estate, rental properties, things like that?
Not bad to have that as part of what you have. Just understand that if I've got a rental house, there's no guarantee that it's always going to be worth more. Look at 2008 through 2011. Property rates dropped by a third or more, give or take the area. And sometimes there are times in economic times when you can't get a renter. So they're not perfect, but it can be a great part of a good portfolio.
I guess it comes down to diversification after all.
Absolutely. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's perfect. Right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for joining us today. We hope that this was an insightful episode for you. One more reminder, check out our website, masterplanretire.com. There you can find multiple retirement resources, as well as links to this episode and other episodes via YouTube or our podcast. Again, feel free to check out your complimentary consultation with Mark Fricks. Schedule that now on our website under the Schedule Now button. It's that simple. Check out his calendar, find a time that works best for you, or give us a call here in office, 770-980-9262. Mark, any parting words today?
Hey, just look forward to talking to you, seeing you soon. Sooner or later, take advantage of the complimentary consultation. There's no obligation, and we'll run several reports for you, show you where you're at. But until we see each other again, remember, plan well and prosper. Take care, everybody.
This was Retirement Roadmap Radio with Mark Fricks of Master Plan Retirement Consultants. To schedule a complimentary consultation, go to masterplanretire.com or call 770-980-9262. Thanks for listening, and remember, plan well and prosper.
All matters discussed during this show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Advisory services offered through Master Plan Retirement Consultants, a registered investment advisor in the state of Georgia. Mark Fricks and Master Plan Retirement Consultants are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.